I'm Misa. So I found a dusty copy of Grimm's Grimmest fairy tales, and I thought it would be fun to read a few on my channel. I'm going to start with Rapunzel because we all know the Disney version, but I'm sure the Grimm's tale will be much creepier. And I haven't actually read this one yet, but I know that all the original fairy tales that they wrote are very dark, so I think it'll be fun. A man and a woman had long in vain wished for a child. At length, the woman hoped that God was about to grant her desire. These people had a little window at the back of their house from which a splendid garden could be seen, which was full of the most beautiful flowers and herbs. It was, however, surrounded by a high wall, and no one dared go into it, because it belonged to an enchantress, who had great power and was dreaded by all the world. One day, the woman was standing by this window and looking down into the garden, when she saw a bed that was planted with the most beautiful rampion. And the leaves looked so fresh and green that she longed for it and had the greatest desire to eat some. This desire increased every day, and she knew that she could not get any of it, and she quite pined away and began to look pale and miserable. Then her husband was alarmed and asked, "What ails you, dear wife?" "Ah," she replied, "if I can't eat some of that rampion that's in the garden behind our house, I shall die." The man, who loved her very much, thought, "Sooner than let your wife die, bring her some of the rampion yourself, let it cost what it will." Sea ladies never settle. At twilight, he climbed over the wall into the garden of the enchantress, hastily clutched a handful of rampion, and took it to his wife. She at once made herself a salad of it and ate it greedily. It tasted so good to her, so very good that the next day she longed for it 3 times as much as before. Honestly, nothing tastes better than a stolen salad. If she was to have any rest, her husband must once more descend into the garden. In the gloom of evening, therefore, he let himself down again. But when he clambered down the wall, he was terrified, for he saw the enchantress standing before him. "How can you dare," said she, "descend into my garden and steal my rampion like a thief? You shall suffer for it." "Ah," answered he, "I only made up my mind to do it out of necessity. You see, my wife saw your rampion from the window and felt such a longing for it that she would have died if she had not got some to eat." Then the enchantress allowed her anger to be softened and said to him, "If the case be as you say, I will allow you to take away with you as much rampion as you will. Only I make one condition. You must give me the child which your wife will bring into the world. It shall be well treated, and I will care for it like a mother." The man, in his terror, consented to everything, and when the woman was brought to bed, the enchantress appeared at once, gave the child the name of Rapunzel, and took it away with her. Man, that was quick. I wonder if he explained that deal to the wife, or just she was shocked to just have her baby taken away one day. Rapunzel grew into the most beautiful child under the sun. When she was 12 years old, the enchantress shut her into a tower which lay in a forest and had neither stairs nor door, but quite at the top was a little window. When the enchantress wanted to go in, she placed herself beneath it and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Rapunzel had long, magnificent hair, fine as spun gold, and when she heard the voice of the enchantress, she unfastened her braided tresses, wound them round one of the hooks of the window above, and then the hair fell 20 ells down, and the enchantress climbed up by it. I'm not sure what ells means. I'm gonna guess 20 feet or 20 meters down. After a few years, it came to pass that the king's son rode through the forest and passed by the tower. Then he heard a song, which was so charming that he stood still and listened. This was Rapunzel, who in her solitude passed her time in letting her sweet voice resound. The king's son looked in vain for the door to the tower, but the singing had so deeply touched his heart that every day he went out into the forest and listened to it. Once he was thus standing behind a tree, he saw that the enchantress came there, and he heard how she cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Then Rapunzel let down the braids of her hair, and the enchantress climbed up to her. "If that is the ladder by which one mounts, I too will try my fortune," said he. And the next day, when it began to grow dark, he went to the tower and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me." Soon the hair fell down, and the king's son climbed up. Side note, don't you think Rapunzel would have noticed that wasn't the same voice? I mean, I know my range is quite wide with the voices here, but I'm sure she would have been able to tell that wasn't the enchantress mother. Anyways, soon the hair fell down and the king's son climbed up. At first, Rapunzel was terribly frightened when a man, such as her eyes had never yet beheld, came to her. But the king's son began to talk to her like a friend, and he told her that his heart had been so stirred that it had let him have no rest, and he had been forced to see her. Rapunzel lost her fear, and soon she came to like the king's son so much that she agreed to let him visit every day and to pull him up. The two lived joyfully for a time, and when he asked if Rapunzel would take him for her husband, she said yes, and laid her hand in his. "I will willingly go away with you," she said, "but I do not know how to get down. Bring with you a skein of silk every time that you come, and I will weave a ladder with it. And when it is ready, I will descend, and you will take me on your horse." They agreed that until that time he should come to her every evening, for the old woman came by day. The enchantress noticed nothing at all of this, until once Rapunzel said to her, "Tell me, godmother, why my clothes are so tight, and why they won't fit me any longer." Uh-oh. "Ah, you wicked child," cried the enchantress. "What do I see before me? I thought I had separated you from the world, and yet you have deceived me." I mean, this is the first time you're noticing? In her anger, she clutched Rapunzel's beautiful tresses, wrapped them a few times round her left hand, seized a pair of scissors with the right, and snip, snip, they were cut off. And the lovely braids lay on the ground. And she was so merciless that she took poor Rapunzel in a waste and desert, where she lived in great woe and misery. On the same day that she cast out Rapunzel, however, the enchantress fastened the braids of her hair, which she had cut off, to the hook of the window. And when the king's son came and cried, "Rapunzel, Rapunzel, let down your hair to me," she let the hair down. The king's son ascended, but instead of finding his dearest Rapunzel, he found the enchantress, who gazed at him with wicked and venomous eyes. "Aha!" she cried mockingly. "Rapunzel is lost to you, and you will never see her again." The king's son was beside himself with pain, and in his despair he leapt down from the tower. He escaped with his life, but the thorns into which he fell pierced his eyes. Then he wandered blind about the forest, ate nothing but roots and berries, and did naught but lament and weep over the loss of his dearest wife. Thus he roamed about in misery for some years, and at length came to the desert where Rapunzel, with the twins that she had borne, a boy and a girl, lived in wretchedness. He heard a voice, and it seemed so familiar to him that he went toward it, and when he approached, Rapunzel knew him, and fell on his neck and wept. 2 of her tears wet his eyes, and they grew clear again, and he could see with them as before. He led her to his kingdom, where he was joyfully received, and they lived for a long time afterward, happily and contented. Okay, that's it. So, it got kind of dark, but they wrapped it around nicely with a happy ending there. So, kind of Disney-esque in that sense. I'm just wondering why no one was looking for the king's son. Like, he was just left to wander around. I'm sure, like, someone would have seen him, right? Also, they didn't really follow up on Rapunzel's biological mom and dad. I guess they were just so happy with the salad that they didn't care that their daughter left, or maybe that wasn't important to the story. In the Disney one, it kind of like wraps back around to that. I animated on the Tangled TV series that takes place after the movie, so I have a hard time relating this story to the Disney one. I can't imagine Eugene being blinded and walking through the desert, but it's cool to see where stories start before all the creative liberties are taken. Anyways, I'm going to be reading another story soon, so tune in if you want to hear me read more Grimm's fairy tales, or if not, thanks for stopping by.